So, welcome to Stronger Than Before. I'm so glad you're here today. Whether you're listening on your morning commute, whether you're squeezing this in between meetings, or you just got your earbuds in while you're doing something that probably requires your full attention, I see you, and I'm glad you chose to spend this time with me. But before we dive in, I just want to take a second and acknowledge something. If you clicked on this episode, there's a reason. Maybe things have felt heavy lately. Maybe you've been questioning yourself more than usual. Or maybe you've been working hard and not seeing the results you thought you'd have by now. Or maybe you're in a season where you feel like you're constantly one step behind everyone else. Like you're the only one who doesn't quite have it together. I want you to know that feeling has a name, and I know it intimately. We're going to talk about all of that today. And this is one of those episodes I've been wanting to record for a long time. Not because I have it all figured out, but because I've lived through the exact thing that we're going to talk about. And I think that the most powerful thing I can do is walk through it with you, honestly, the way I wish someone had walked through it with me. So today we're going to talk about training your mind, how to stay strong, focused, and resilient when life gets hard. And friend, life does get hard, but that's not pessimism. That's just truth. So let's get into it. I want to start something that might feel a little uncomfortable. The hardest battles that you'll ever fight are not out in the world. They're not with your boss, your circumstances, your competitors, or your bank account. The hardest battle, the one that determines everything else, is the one that's happening right between your ears. Every single day, you are in a conversation with yourself. And most of us have never stopped to ask, is this conversation helping me or hurting me? And here's what I know about that inner voice. Mine spent years telling me I wasn't enough, that I didn't belong in the rooms I was standing in, that it only a matter of time before people figured out that I had somehow slipped through the cracks and didn't actually deserve to be there. That voice had a grip on me that I didn't even really fully recognize. Because when you're listening to someone long enough, you stop hearing it as the voice and you start hearing it as the truth. That's imposter syndrome. And here's what's the wild about it. It doesn't care how accomplished you are. It doesn't care how hard you've worked, how many degrees you have, how many people respect you. It just finds that crack in your confidence and lives there. And the reason I'm starting here with the battles within is because everything we're going to talk today lives or dies on this foundation. You can learn every strategy in the world for building resilience and mental strength. But if you don't first understand that the war is internal, you keep fighting the wrong enemy. So let's agree on something before we go any further. Your mind is not the enemy. It's just untrained. And today we're going to start training it. Okay, so let's talk about the first principle. I want to dig into this today. It's probably one of the sounds simple and honestly one of the hardest things to actually practice. And that is you have to accept reality. Don't resist it. Now I know what some of you are thinking, accept reality. But my reality is hard. My reality is unfair. My reality is not where I thought I'd be. And I hear you. I generally do. I went through it. But here's the distinction I need you to sit with. Accepting reality is not the same as approving of it. Acceptance is not resignation. It's not giving up. It's not saying this is fine when it's not fine. Acceptance is simply the act of acknowledging what is true right now so that you can figure out what to do next. Because you cannot navigate from a location you refuse to acknowledge. Think about it this way. If you're driving and you miss your exit, you have two choices. You can spend the next 20 miles being furious that you've missed it, rehashing that moment, beating yourself up, convinced the entire trip is ruined, or you can simply say, okay, I missed it. What's the next exit? Let me recalculate. The GPS doesn't grieve the missed exit. It just recalculates. And that's what acceptance gives you, the ability to recalculate. So here's where this connected personally for me. There was a season in my life where I kept resisting the reality of what I was experiencing. I was in rooms where I felt invisible, not because people were treating me poorly, but because I had made myself invisible. I'd convinced myself that shrinking was safer than being seen, that if I didn't take up too much space, no one could reject me, that I never fully committed to believing in myself, and I couldn't fully fail. And that resistance to acknowledge that, the refusal to look at that pattern clearly, kept me stuck for far longer than I needed to be. Acceptance was the unlocked, not because it felt good, it didn't, but because it was real. And you can only work with what's real. So here's the practice I want you to try this week. When something hard is happening, let's say a disappointment, let's say a setback, a situation you didn't choose, instead of immediately going into why is this happening to me mode, try sitting with this sentence. This is where I am right now. This is true. Now what? The now what is everything, and that's where your power lives. But before we go any further, I want to pause and I want to tell you something that is really close to my heart. And honestly, it's the reason behind so much of what we talk about on this show. My book, When I Was Invisible, A Memoir of Imposter Syndrome, Identity and Becoming Stronger Than Before, launches on July 4th. And yes, I chose the date intentionally because this book is about freedom. It's about the moment you stop letting the invisible weight of I'm not enough run your life and you step into who you actually are. This book is the most honest thing I've ever written. It's personal, it's raw, and it's for anyone who has ever sat in a room full of capable people and thought, I don't belong here. For anyone who has ever achieved something and immediately wondered when they are going to figure out I don't deserve this. For anyone who has been made to feel invisible by the world, by a situation, or most painfully by themselves. You can pre-order When I Was Invisible right now at kellydeandra.com, or you go to bit.ly/Kelly's book. I'll put the link in the show notes. Pre-orders mean the world. They tell the world this book matters before it even hits the shelves. So go to bit.ly/Kelly's book, and I cannot wait for you to read it. Okay, let's get back to work. So we're going to control your thoughts and control your life. All right, so we talked about accepting reality. Now let's talk about the next layer. And the next layer is controlling your thoughts. I want to be careful here because I think control your thoughts has become one of those phrases that sounds powerful, but has been so overused and is almost meaningless. Like, cool, control my thoughts. How? What does that actually look like on a Tuesday morning when everyone is going sideways? Here's how I think about it. You are not your thoughts. You are the person observing your thoughts. And that distinction, that tiny bit of space between you and the thought, is where everything changes. Your brain is going to produce thoughts. That's their job. It's been doing that your whole life. Some of the thoughts are useful, and some of them are absolute lies, dressed up like a very specific canvas of your own voice, which is why they sound so convincing. The thought, I'm not qualified for this, feels differently from the thought, I'm hungry, even though both are just electrical signals for your brain to produce. One feels like fact and the other feels like need. And we need to kind of treat them accordingly. But here's the truth. Neither one is automatically true. Both can be examined. When imposter syndrome was running my mental life, I wasn't examining my thoughts. I was just believing them. Every thought that sounded like a warning about my worth, I accepted as a news report. Breaking news, you're not enough. This just in, you're about to be found out. Stay tuned for more. I'm being comical, but that's how it sounds. The shift happens when you start treating those thoughts like a weather forecast instead of a news report. A forecast is useful information. It tells you something. But you don't cancel your whole life because the forecast says rain. So when a thought shows up and says, hey, you don't belong here, you can notice it. You can say, that's the thought again, and then you can ask, is this useful? Is this true? And what would I do if I didn't believe this? You have choices. The last question is a powerful one. What would I do if I didn't believe this thought? It's a powerful question because your brain is now recalculating that question into something more. Because of the time, you already know what to do. The thought is just standing in the way. Practical tool. When a limiting thought shows up, write it down. Get it out of your head and onto paper. Because on paper, it has a different power. On paper, you can look at it and ask, is this actually true? Where's the evidence? Where's the counter evidence? It leaves your brain and you put it on paper and you have a different diagnostic of the question. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who chooses what to do with them. So we want to focus on what you can change. So I want to talk about one of the single most energy draining habits humans have. And I say that as someone who has been deeply guilty of it. And that is we're spending our mental bandwidth on things we cannot control. There's a version of you that is pouring time, you're pouring energy, you're pouring emotion and headspace into things that will not budge no matter how much you think about them. Other people's opinions, the economy, what really happened, what might happen, how someone else reacted, whether someone else recognizes your work. That is out of your control. And listen, I'm not saying that those things don't matter. I'm saying that your focus on them does nothing to change them, but it absolutely changes you, and not for the better. This is one of the places where imposter syndrome is very sneaky, because when you feel like you don't fully belong or you're not quite enough, you over-index on external validation. You focus obsessively on what other people think, how they're reacting, whether they approve, because on some level you believe your worth depends on that verdict. And that is exhausting in every way, sense, and form. It's an exhausting way to live because you've zero control over anyone else's verdict. So here's the framework I want you to use. Divide everything in your life into two circles. The inner circle is what you can control. My apologies. Your effort, your attitude, your preparation, your response, your words, your choices. And then the outer circle is what you cannot control. The outcome, other people's reactions, timing, circumstances, luck. Most of us are spending 80% of our energy on the outer circle and 20% on the inner one. You want to flip that. You want to put your focus ruthlessly, intentionally on what you can actually influence and watch how much lighter you feel. This doesn't mean you stop caring about outcomes. It means you stop making outcomes the measure of your worth. It means you shift from did it work to did I show up fully, and let that be enough. Because here's what I know to be true. The people who make the most meaningful progress aren't the ones who obsessed over the results. They're the ones who become obsessed with their process. They commit to the inputs and release the outcomes. And that's usually how the best outcomes happened. So let's turn challenges into opportunities. I want to tell you something that I generally believe, and that I have to fight to believe in the hardest season of my life. Every challenge you're facing right now is also an opportunity in disguise. I'm going to say that again. Every challenge that you're facing right now is an opportunity in disguise. Let that sink in. I know that sounds like a poster on the wall of corporate conference room, but stay with me. When I was in the thick of my own invisible season, when imposter syndrome had me shrinking, when I felt like I was performing a version of myself that wasn't actually me, I couldn't see it as an opportunity. I could only see it as evidence. Evidence that I wasn't cut out for what I wanted. Evidence that other people were ahead of me. Evidence that I should just quietly lower my expectations so I could stop being disappointed. But here's what the season gave me. It gave me the material. It gave me the understanding, and it gave me the ability to sit across from someone who's fighting the same thing and say, I know, I've been there, and here's what I've learned on the other side. That's the opportunity, not the one you choose, not the pretty one, but the real one. Challenges are the curriculum. They're not interruptions to your growth. They are your growth. The version of you that exists after a hard season is different from the version that went in, not just because you survived it, but because it changed you in ways you can't even fully articulate yet. So when you're in something hard right now, I want you to ask a different question. Instead of saying, why is this happening to me? Try, what is this preparing me for? Instead of, how do I make this stop? Try, what can I learn here that I couldn't have learned any other way? That reframe won't make the hard thing easy, but it will make it purposeful. And purpose is one of the most powerful fuels there is. So you need to build discipline over motivation. Okay, I need to say something that might ruffle some feathers, and that is this. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings are unreliable. Motivation comes and goes. You feel motivated after a great podcast episode, and I hope this is one of them. Or if after reading a book that lights you up, or a conversation that reminds you of who you want to be. And then Monday happens, the alarm goes off, and the feeling's gone. If you're waiting to feel motivated before taking action, you're going to be waiting a lot, because motivation actually follows action. It doesn't reliably precede it. What sustainable success runs on is not motivation. It's actually discipline. And discipline isn't a personality trait. It's a practice. It's a decision you make when the feeling isn't there. And here's how I think about it through the lens of the work I've done in my own mindset. For years, I waited to feel confident before I would speak up in a room. I waited to feel qualified before I would raise my hand. I waited to feel ready before I would take the risk. And confidence, like motivation, is a feeling. It comes after the action, not before. Discipline says, I'm going to do the thing even though I don't feel ready. I'm going to show up even though I don't feel confident. I'm going to take the step even though I can't see the whole staircase. Every time you act in spite of the feelings, you build evidence. And evidence is what slowly, not overnight, but slowly shifts your story your mind is telling you about you. You don't have to build a new identity by waiting to feel different. You build by acting differently until it really feels like everything caught up. Small, consistent actions done even when you don't feel like it compound over time into something extraordinary. That is discipline. And it is far more powerful than any motivational video, including this one. So you want to develop a resilient winner's mindset. What does that mean? So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what it means to have a mindset that is resilient, because I think a lot of people get this misunderstood a lot. Resilience is not the absence of struggle. I know. It's not being unaffected by hard things. And it's not a wall you build around yourself so nothing can touch you. That's not resilience. That's armor. And armor is heavy, and it keeps out the good stuff to come in. Resilience is the ability to be moved by something and still keep moving. It's acknowledging the full weight of a hard season and choosing again and again to take the next step anyway. A winner's mindset, and I don't love the word winner, because it implies there's a loser, and that's really not the point. But let's call it a strong mindset. A strong mindset is not about being right all the time. It's about always succeeding. It's about how you respond when you don't. People with strong mindsets fail. They get knocked down. They have seasons where nothing goes right and everything feels impossible. The difference is they don't make that hard season mean something permanent about themselves. This is a core with imposter syndrome. And honestly, with so many of the mental patterns that hold us back, we take a temporary experience and we turn it into a permanent identity. I failed at this because I am a failure. I felt invisible in that room because I was invisible. Someone didn't choose me because I'm not worth choosing. A resilient mindset interrupts that pattern. It says, this is the moment and not a monument. This is what happened, and this is not who I am. Your identity is not the hardest chapter. It's not your worst day. It's not the version of you that was scared or small or unseen. Your identity has a full story, including the chapters still being written. And still being written, you are the author of your story. You are the author of your identity. So we need to keep moving no matter what. So I want to talk for a minute about one of the most underrated acts of courage there is, and that just continuing. Not continuing because you feel great, not continuing because everything is working, and not continuing because you have a clear picture of where this is all going, just continuing. There's a version of keep moving forward that looks dramatic, the montage. the triumphant music, the moment where everything turns around and it makes sense. And then there's the real version, which is waking up and doing the next thing, making that call, sending the email, showing up to a meeting even when you're not sure it's good anywhere, writing the next page when you're not sure anyone will ever read it, and doing the work in the dark before anyone is watching. That's what keeping moving forward actually looks like. It's unglamorous, it's consistent, and it's quiet. But when I was writing, when I was invisible, there were so many moments where I thought about stopping, where the voice in my head said, "Who are you to write a book? Who are you to think your story matters?" And I kept going, not because I felt confident, not because I was certain it was good enough, but because stopping felt like giving the wrong voice the win. And I wasn't willing to do that. Forward motion is a choice. Make it, even when it's small, especially when it's small. So there are some mental habits of strong people. And as we come towards the end of today's episode, I want to leave you with something practical. The mental habits that I believe separate people who stayed stuck from people who keep growing. Not because they're smarter or more talented, but because of how they've trained their brains, how they trained their minds. One, they protect their mental environment. They are intentional about what they consume, who they spend time with, and what voices they let speak into their life. They don't let every opinion in. They're curators of their own thinking. Two, they have a relationship with discomfort. They don't run from hard things. They learn that discomfort is usually a signal that growth is happening, that something important is on the other side of that hard moment. Three, they talk to themselves better. Honestly, this might be the most impactful one. The internal dialogue of people who thrive is different. Not perfect. They still fear. They still doubt. But they've learned to respond to those thoughts rather than to be controlled by them. And four, they rest without guilt. They understand that recovery is part of the performance, that stillness is not laziness, that you cannot draw from an empty well. So you need to recover. Five, they keep the word to themselves. Every time you make a promise to yourself and break it, you erode your own trust in it. They understand that self-trust is built through small, kept commitments. And that is one of the most important relationships you'll ever have. So here's my challenge for you coming out of today's episode. Just one thing. I don't want to overwhelm you with a list of 10, so just one thing. This week, I want you to identify one thought that has been running your life. One story you've been telling yourself that isn't serving you. Write it down, look at it, and then write 3 pieces of evidence that contradict it. Note to force yourself into toxic positivity, not to pretend it isn't there, just to remind yourself that the thought is not the whole truth. Because here's what I know about you. The person who chooses to listen to this today, who is doing the work of understanding their own mind, you are stronger than you think you are. You have already survived things that were supposed to take you out, and you're still here. And that's not an accident. Thank you so much for spending this time with me on Stronger Than Before. This show exists because of you, because of every message, every review, every share to any friend who needs this. If today's episode meant something to you, I would love if you would leave a review, if you would generally make a difference in helping more people find this show. And please go pre-order When It Was Invisible at bit.ly/Kelly's book. It launches on July 4th, and I cannot wait for it to be in your hands. And until next time, keep going. You're stronger than before.